Welcome back, loyal listeners.
Oh my gosh. You have to understand also, we're doing this again, but right before we started recording, she's like doing voice warm-ups.
Well, I want my voice to be at its peak.
Right, which peak means after the kids go to bed and you're already tired. Peak voice time.
Well, this is what we got to work with, so. Hey, you know what? Memphis is being babysat.
Yep, we got a babysitter for him. You might be familiar with this babysitter.
His name is Coco Melon. So anyway, we're Red Weather Christians. I'm Jen.
I'm Steve.
Thanks for joining us again. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, and we want to put out a couple of other background pieces. One, we are not biblical scholars. We are Christians who happen to read the Bible still, but when we read it, we analyze it, or we actually think about what it's saying. So for those biblical scholars out there listening, go a little easy on us. We don't know Greek, we don't know Hebrew, can't read it in the original text.
This is true.
Also, we are technically considered missionaries here. As we do raise support, we have donors who are supporting us.
Yes.
And we appreciate that.
And I'm a little overdue in writing our fall newsletter.
Some of you may get that. Way to go. Being missionaries and taking on a different label as a Christian. You're like, oh, you're a missionary. Comes with, at least for Jen,
trepidation. Well, and a little anxiety, honestly, because first of all, in my life, never did I ever think that I would be a missionary. Not that I think being a missionary is any kind of bad thing. I just didn't see it happening in my life. I didn't feel called by the Lord, if you will, to become a missionary. And when Steve got the job at this school here, one of the things that they suggested was to raise funds.
Some of the anxiety that comes with this is, oh my goodness, what would our Christian supporters think about maybe episode 1?
When we are acknowledging that we have a lot of doubts about our faith, about what we read in the Bible, about what we hear from the pulpit, all kinds of things.
Right, and hopefully this resonates with some of you who have those doubts, haven't been able to voice those doubts, or are in some sort of Christian leadership position and you feel like you can't ever even say them out loud.
That's what gives me anxiety about calling myself a missionary. I feel a little bit trapped, maybe, in what I can say, how I come across, what I write in the newsletters. That's a weird one, too, because I write on a blog and I'm pretty candid. And then I write these newsletters and I have this whole thought process. Oh man, is this Christian-y enough? It's just horrible. I don't like it.
Yeah. The fact that we come back to this, like, what do people think? Are we Christian enough? That's such a weird concept.
Silly.
It shouldn't even, why would we be the one, why is the onus on us to be Christian enough if we are Christian?
Oh yeah, it's just the whole, it's like what we teach our kids not to be. Like, don't care too much about what other people think of you. Just literally today, I told Asher, you know what's great about us is that we don't care too much about what people think about what we have, what we own. Because he was saying that the kinds of folders that he has at school that we provided for him from various places where we could just find them, like Steve's classroom, just old stuff.
Yeah.
His folders aren't as nice and new or whatever as his classmates. And I was trying to encourage him to not care about that.
Right. And let's be clear, for all you listeners who are not as close of friends with us, one of the two of us cares significantly more about what people think. And I'll give you a clue, it's not me.
Surprise!
So when we have this anxiety, and although I talk about it as well, the anxiety on this front of are we Christian enough, mostly comes from Jen.
Yeah, it's completely true. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. It's how God made me, if you will.
Yes, God made you that way.
So, calling ourselves missionaries is a little bit of a foreign concept to us. We didn't think we would be in this position writing support letters. We don't call them support letters, actually. We just call them newsletters. And some people do support us financially. So I think when we were recording episode 1, I was editing it and then going through all the process of publishing, I definitely had trepidation about putting it out there for everybody to hear because I thought about those people who support us and I was thinking, gosh, they support us with their money, which means a lot. You know, money talks. Where you put your money, it means a lot. So I'm thinking, oh man, we're expressing doubts or whatever. Are they going to think, oh, why did I support them? They don't even know what they're doing over there.
Right. And here's a story separate from us, but if you can imagine, here's a guy I know here in Quito who went out to have a beer with another guy I know who's a known atheist. Not a problem. Really nice guy.
Yeah.
But would you think his supporters, because he's also a missionary, would support him in going out to drink alcohol with an atheist?
I think there are definitely different camps on this issue. I think some evangelicals would say that that is totally fine, even though it's beer, not a big deal. He's evangelizing, and that's great. And then other camps would probably say evangelizing good, beer bad.
Or just association. Like, why would you associate with it? And even though you're a missionary, you would essentially be associated with people who might not know Christ. What if you don't talk about Christ at all while you're drinking beers? Which they probably didn't.
Yeah, I guess that is a weird thing to me because as a human, I feel like making relationships with other humans is really, really at the core of so many elements of life. And going out with somebody, having a couple of beers, it's weird for me to say that because Steve and I are teetotalers. Not that we judge anyone who drinks, we just don't. We've just chosen that for our lives. But I would say going out with someone, having a couple of beers, and establishing that relationship is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yes. So, there's some problems within the church. This is where we have some doubts as well. When there is conflict. And what do you do with it? What if you have two Christians who disagree on some topic? Who's right? Do you go to the Bible to see who's right? So if two Christians, they both profess to be Christians, they both believe basic tenets of Christianity, they disagree. This would be similar to what Jen was talking about earlier. What if our supporters, who are Christians, don't think we're doing the right thing here?
Yeah. That kind of terrifies me, actually. And I don't really know how to reconcile that except kind of what we're doing right now and talking it out. And some of you may receive our newsletters and be listening and think, yeah, I don't really know what they are doing there.
Yeah.
As far as being quote unquote missionaries.
I'm shaping and molding the minds of students.
Oh my gosh, the way you said that.
Right? That's what I do as a teacher.
Well, let me just say this really quickly. Having been a teacher for many years, I mentioned this in another episode that the best part of teaching is the relationships you make with the students. And I still have a lot of those relationships. And I think that can be a really powerful thing. Do I talk to those students about God when I communicate with them? No, probably not. If it comes up organically, I would love to, and that would be fine, and that would be great. But I guess maybe that's where someone might disagree with how we go about doing things. We are really big on relationship building.
Yes.
And, living a good life, trying to be good humans and let that be an example. And then let conversations come up naturally rather than forcing them to sit down with us and say the sinner's prayer. Go through the Romans road and...
Yes. Yeah. Coming back to conflict, what happens when, what if one of our supporters says, well, I think you're doing it wrong? Well, it's weird because there's actually a time in the Bible, and Paul is actually going to use one of the words that we would not appreciate someone telling us. That is, if someone uses the Bible as a reference, and they say, well, Jen, the Bible clearly states, blah, 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 blah.
That is like big red flag. I remember listening to that podcast I mentioned in episode 1, The Faith Angle, and they had a guest on who said, if anybody says the Bible clearly states that, ... I have a tendency to tune them out. Something along those lines. We're just like, the Bible is a very complicated book. It has gone through many different translations. It is not in its original language. There's a lot going on there. And for anyone to have the audacity to say, well, the Bible clearly states that, there's just going to be a red flag on that.
Yeah. And even if I do think that there might be some clear examples from the Bible about, loving others, loving God, I probably would try to shy away from the Bible clearly states type of things. But, so this is where two Christians, two founding fathers of Christianity disagree and what happens. So you'll find this if you were looking at Galatians 2. Paul is opposing Peter. Now, Peter, you can think of what you want. He's the rock, build the church upon Peter. Paul writes most of the New Testament. But Paul writes in Galatians, when Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he was clearly in the wrong. It goes on to talk about how Peter was under the influence of Judaism in the sense that he was a Jew and he used to eat with Gentiles and, kind of fraternize with Gentiles.
Whoa.
I say that in just the friendly terms. I don't know what else it could be. But then...
Frat boys.
Yes. Peter had his frat of the other apostles. They were hanging out with other frats who happened to be Gentiles. It was all great. Anyway.
Playing, what's that game?
Beer pong?
Yeah, beer pong.
They were, some form of beer pong, I'm sure. That makes total sense. But
that was lost over the course of the years in the different translations, but in the original Greek, yes, it was beer pong.
Yeah. Well, they stopped playing beer pong with the Gentiles because they weren't Jewish enough.
Nope.
They weren't circumcised.
Ooh.
So Paul's like, Peter, that's wrong. Following law does not make us Christian. And that's powerful. He says, know that a man is not justified by observing the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. We shouldn't have to come against another Christian in conflict who says, you didn't observe the law, you're not a Christian anymore. That's so weird, but it still happens. This is part why we have anxiety about talking about these things. For instance, my friend who went out to have a beer, drinking's against the law of this particular denomination.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, it's very difficult to keep track of all the rules and all the nuances of all the different denominations. It's exhausting. I don't even try. You can't do it.
And the problem really comes down to just what Paul is saying. And I don't even agree with all of what Paul says elsewhere in the Bible.
We will get to Paul in another episode, I promise.
It's that if you take the Bible and make laws from the Bible and then try to follow those laws, you're probably, one, going to fail, and two, it's not going to necessarily get you any more salvation than someone who's not following the laws.
Yeah.
And so where we're at as missionaries, when we put our doubts out there and we think, what if we're not doing the right thing? Or what if they think we're not doing the right thing? That shouldn't be our concern at all.
We had someone ask us, he had read our newsletter, and he said something along the lines of, so what is your goal here? What is this all about? And Steve and I are like, well, we're just writing newsletters to kind of keep you updated with our lives and what we're up to, the relationships that we're making here and some of the things going on here. Because I think he is kind of in that world. I think he was used to the support letters coming in and saying, here are the expenses coming up. Here is a number that we're hoping to reach of financial support from readers like you. A little PBS reference in there for you.
We should have been listeners like you.
I know, I thought about it, but...
Oh, well.
It's not, no, but they're reading the support letter. They're listening now, but...
So here's a different problem on that, is that I tried, and Jen was the moneymaker at the time, to set ourselves up in the States to basically retire early. Totally separate podcast entirely. Maybe we'll talk about it. But we basically can fund ourselves here. So when we ask people to support us, we're telling them, we're taking your support money and we're directly investing in something here.
Yes. That I felt like I was pretty clear about that in one of our very first newsletters, that we are supporting our community here.
Right. The house down the street that takes in street boys, we will be supporting them.
Casa G.
Education Equals Hope, that helps educate people who otherwise couldn't afford it. Even though education is free, you have to buy books and uniforms and things, and if you don't have those, you can't go to school. We support that.
Yes.
That's what we do.
I mean, just simple things too, like trying to buy locally rather than at a chain grocery store as much as we can for at least our fruits and vegetables. Little things like that where we're supporting locally as much as we can and trying to make a positive difference in our community right here. But missionaries in the sense of we are going out to street corners with the megaphones, preaching the gospel, or fire and brimstone, or even just trying to seek out specific people to convert. That isn't really part of our plan. If conversion happened or whatever, we're not against that.
No, we're not against that.
This goes back to that awkwardness.
That would be weird.
Oh my gosh. This goes back for me to that awkwardness when somebody sidles up next to me and just says, Jen, I just feel led to pray with you right now. And that being so unnatural to me. I feel a little bit like that with conversion. Seeking out relationships solely for that purpose. If that is a part of what happens, great. But where Steve and I are at is the building the relationships and seeing where that goes and trying to be the best humans that we can be.
Yeah, I hope that's most people's goals, be the best human that they can be. But yeah, we don't have fundraising goals. Like I said, we kind of set ourselves up financially to be able to support our lives here from stuff going on in the States. So what we do here, if someone were to say, oh, that's not right, you should do it differently. I don't know, maybe I'd like to hear that and we'd talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is not to just shut down or have huge fear or let fear get in the way of what we think we should be doing, which is being the best humans we can be, which includes the best version of Christian we can be.
Yeah. I think it is more difficult for people in Christian leadership positions. And I I feel sorry for you guys, whoever you may be out there listening, because I feel like that would be really difficult. People don't necessarily want a leader who is expressing a lot of doubt. That it doesn't come across as a strong leader to be expressing doubt. And so I think that would be really difficult. But I guess that's a little bit of what we feel calling ourselves missionaries, putting ourselves into that box.
Yeah, and if I had to stand up and give a talk about how I feel or Christianity in general, I feel confident I can still express basic tenets of Christianity and yet not reveal all my doubts. But if that led to a conversation with someone and they had doubts, I might come alongside them and say, I have that same question still. Mm-hmm. Even though I was the one on stage, maybe be confident in my faith.
Yeah, I think that's a trap that a lot of leaders fall into, pastors, youth leaders, is that they feel like they have to have not only the confidence, but the rock solid faith to be able to even get up on that stage and talk to other people, so that when people ask them questions, they have the answers. And what a limiting way to live life. Really. I think people think, to have all the answers, that would be great. But it limits you. It limits your brain to think and question and be creative in your thinking and your questioning.
And we so hope to have some objective truth in our lives, things we can have a foundation upon. But when you doubt the foundation, the thing is, if it's really a strong foundation, it will still be there. If I look at the floor and I doubt that it's going to hold me, I can still walk on that floor and it still holds me. The foundation is solid. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I can doubt if it would work. Or maybe I should check the foundation to make sure it's still solid. Anyone think maybe that Miami condo recently?
Ooh.
Anybody?
Oh, that's so sad.
So when we're Christians and we doubt the foundation maybe in the Bible or something, and we're like, maybe we should just check that foundation out a little bit.
Yeah.
You can still stand firm on it. It might still have some objective truth in there, but you might need to dig a little deeper.
I think that an issue with doubting the foundation is the church's reaction to that. The church community, I will say. When you doubt the foundation, or if you ask a question like, hey, church community, what if we're getting this part of the Bible or this part of the interpretation or whatever? What if we're getting it wrong? The church's reaction, I don't think normally is a healthy one.
Well, or if you just look at maybe doctrine, you spend so much time with the denomination, you write a doctrine and you have these dogmas and you go, wait, how do we change this one? Because I don't think this one's right anymore. Because it had to happen to get to where we're at with 500 plus different denominations just in the U.S. Somewhere, someone's thinking these doctrines are good and these ones are bad, and then someone else thinks those are good and these are bad.
Like I said before, it's exhausting to even keep up with all of this stuff. But I would say, in general, a reaction that the church might give if you ask them, what if we're getting this wrong, is, if you are questioning that foundational element, my friend, you have lost your faith. Or you're going soft. Or you're succumbing to popular culture.
Yeah. You get preachers who choose to denounce other preachers who are maybe soft and culturally relative. And that's troubling. Because we should try to be more united. Really.
I've had so many pastors, not my home pastor from growing up, never him, but starting probably in college, the pastors that I've had, oh my gosh, they gossip about other pastors. What's up with that? Every single one since college has done that. They talk badly about other pastors and they say these things like, well, these other pastors, all they preach is about God is love, but I'm here to tell you the real deal. And I am here to tell you what's really in that Bible, even if it doesn't make you happy. I'm going to do that. The other pastors won't, but I will. So many of my pastors have said very similar things to that. And I have never appreciated that.
Yeah. And they're not necessarily naming names, but they're naming a style of preaching or a style of Christianity that they don't like and that they think is soft.
I just feel like it is self-marketing. And it's icky to me. So going back to maybe the anxiety about publishing. Last night, we had just published our first episode, and I could not sleep. I was just wide-eyed. I had to get up out of bed, come out and do some writing, just some brainstorming to try to get what was in my head out on paper so that maybe I could relax. It was really strange. I don't normally have trouble going to sleep. And so there was something going on with that. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, wow, that's not good that somehow I have been conditioned in all my years of being in the Christian community to get anxiety over publishing a podcast episode where Steve and I express some doubts that we have in the church. That should not be a big deal, and it is. And so I would say that that is definitely a very big purpose to why we're even doing this podcast at all, is to maybe normalize doubts in the church and say to everybody who has doubts, it's okay. Like I mentioned before, it signals that your faith is alive and that it's not dead or you're not a zombie.
And if you're like us, we consider ourselves Christians. And you can be a Christian and have these doubts.
We also hope that if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not a Christian, that you still enjoy what we have to say. I feel like you can apply a lot of these principles to a lot of different things in life. Never stop learning, ask questions, point out flaws if need be to make things better. Just lots of good things going on here, hopefully. We can hope.
Hope
is the thing with feathers. That's an Emily Dickinson poem for you guys, for you literary folk out there listening. You're welcome.
I was actually thinking more of hope and the quote from Shawshank Redemption, but that's okay.
Of course.
Red and Andy are talking how dangerous hope is on the inside, makes someone go crazy. And I don't disagree in how that might carry over to if you're stuck on the inside of somewhere and you have hope that it'll change. Or hope that you'll get out and you won't. Then it's dangerous.
Yes. And then if you've read Elie Wiesel's book Night, where he is in a concentration camp, he says that hope was the thing that kept him alive.
Right. And I would agree. But there's that comment from Red in Shawshank Redemption that just makes it seem dangerous.
I think it can be.
Well, I hope that this has been entertaining for you, and that you come and listen again.
Holy cow, this is long.
That's what she said.
Oh my gosh. I'm definitely editing that out. There's no context to that. I was looking at the time and it says 37 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening. We're Red Weather Christians.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Jen.
Leave no doubt unturned.
Until next time.